Never interrupt your enemies when they're making mistakes. So said Napoleon Bonaparte in the 19th century. Well, guess what? The anti-gunners, in my view, the liberals in America, have made a terrible blunder when it comes to their attempts to ban AR-15s. How so? You see, the Washington Post has just won a Pulitzer Prize for a major set of major series, a 15-part series on the history and the love affair by Americans of the AR-15. And buried well within that big series is something that I suspect we're going to see in front of the U.S. Supreme Court. Watch out. I think the anti-gunners have just conceded that they cannot ban AR-15s, and they don't even know it. Stay tuned. We're going to talk all about it when we get back. Hey folks, I'm Mark Smith, host of the Four Boxes Diner, proud American gun owner, constitutional attorney, member of the United States Supreme Court Bar, and author of many Second Amendment related books, including Disarmed, What the Ukraine War Teaches Americans About the Right to Bear Arms. Big news coming out very soon about the next book, any day now. I'm just finishing off as we speak. You're going to like it. Okay, folks, so major news. No one has figured this out, but I have, and now you will know, because my goal is to make you the smartest person in the room, and here it goes. The Washington Post. That's right, the Washington Post, the establishment newspaper there in D.C., the establishment newspaper of the deep state and the government down there, guess what? Just won a Pulitzer Prize. Let's see. Has a Pulitzer Prize ever gone to a conservative journalist? I don't know. You'll have to tell me. I'm not aware of that. Maybe they have, but I'm just not aware of it. So the Washington Post, surprise, surprise, gets a Pulitzer Prize. But for what? Well, guess what? They got a Pulitzer Prize for a 15-part, I think it was 15 articles, maybe it was 14, 15 articles, a 15-part series on the AR-15. Well, no big deal. At first glance, you may see the story and you may be thinking, hey, no big deal. The sort of the left-leaning Pulitzer Prize Committee is patting on the back the left-leaning Washington Post. So it's just another example of lefties saying, good job, lefty, you're so smart and brilliant, and on and on and on. Okay, well, that's cute. But here's the thing. Guess what I have discovered? Which is, if you look very carefully at the 15-part series by the Washington Post that has just been blessed with the most important award one can receive in the field of journalism, a Pulitzer Prize, guess what is buried well within that? A concession, in fact, in my view, that AR-15s cannot be banned under the Second Amendment. Let me give you the language in this series that just won a Pulitzer Prize by the Washington Post. Tell me if this might be helpful in the fight over whether or not AR-15s can be banned under the Second Amendment. They can't. But check this out from the Washington Post. National surveys by Ipsos in 2022 found that 31% of adults own guns. The post-Ipsos survey of AR-15 owners estimates that 20% of gun owners own an AR-15 style rifle. Taken together, the polls find that 6% of Americans own an AR-15, about 1 in 20. The data suggests that with a U.S. population of 260 million adults, about 16 million Americans own an AR-15. Wow. What does that mean? It means that the Washington Post survey and study that says that 16 million Americans own AR-15s. It's probably much higher, but let's assume for the sake of argument it's just 16 million. They have just conceded in an article that was blessed by the Pulitzer Prize Committee that there's 16 million Americans own these firearms. There's a lot more AR-15s than the number of people, because some people own multiple AR-15s. I'm sure you know plenty of people like that. But at a minimum, according to the Washington Post itself, the newspaper of the deep state, in my view, 16 million Americans own AR-15s, and there's a lot more AR-15s out there beyond just the 16 million people. It's not like they just own one. Many own more than one, obviously. So this is very powerful evidence, and it has just been blessed, not just by the Washington Post editorial board that published the series with that study in it. It was just been blessed by the Pulitzer Prize Committee, the highest prize, the highest award you can receive in journalism. And guess what? Because this is in the Washington Post, do you think someone in the U.S. Supreme Court is reading the Washington Post every single day while they're in Washington? Well, undeniably, they are. But guess what? I took a quick look at some of the briefs submitted to see whether or not that data has found its way before the U.S. Supreme Court already. And guess what? It has. Specifically, this data about 16 million Americans owning AR-15s, thus showing that they're in common use by Americans for lawful purposes, which they undeniably are. It's an easy slam dunk case if the Supreme Court takes the case and does it and applies the right standard, and they should. But we'll see what happens with Bianchi and Harrell and Bevis and so on. But I took a look quickly, and indeed, that study, survey done by the Washington Post, is found not just in the petition for cert by the plaintiffs in the Bianchi case arising from Maryland's quote-unquote challenge to the quote-unquote assault weapon ban in Maryland. That same Washington Post quote from that study that they did also can be found in the briefs in the Bevis-Harrell cases arising from the Illinois quote-unquote assault weapon ban challenges, as well as the magazine cases. So the point is that the Washington Post, by winning this Pulitzer Prize, has now highlighted its work. And one aspect of its work is, guess what? Proof by a group of people that no one is going to believe is pro-gun. No one on the Supreme Court is going to think that the Washington Post is anything other than gun control. So this is essentially, for you lawyers out there, if you're a trial lawyer, what is known as a party opponent admission, in a sense, metaphorically at least, that the anti-gunners in the Washington Post and the Pulitzer Prize Committee, I'm guessing there's not that many Second Amendment supporters either at the Washington Post or in the Pulitzer Prize Committee. I could be wrong, but I don't think I am. That's my guess. So here you have the major part of the anti-gun intellectual movement in America has basically just conceded with that fact that, guess what? They're in common use. 16 million Americans own these. The Pulitzer Prize Committee looked at all these and blessed it, which gives it added legitimacy, if you will. And again, because they're speaking out against their own interest, it's going to be extra persuasive in favor of the Second Amendment. So again, whenever the anti-gun movement, and I do view the Washington Post as part of that, I'm not sure every reporter is, but I think that they're bent, if you look at their op-eds and their editorials, are basically anti-gun at every step of the way. If you look at what just happened here, this is a major win in my view, something that can be used over and over and over again until the Supreme Court finally does the right thing and declare that you cannot ban AR-15s for many reasons, including but not limited to the fact that they are in common use by Americans for lawful purposes. Over 16 million Americans own these things. This is clearly in common use. If you want to come up with just another way, think about Teslas, for example. Teslas are in common use by Americans today. How many people own Teslas? I don't know, maybe 1 million, maybe a little bit more than 1 million. Well, certainly 16 million Americans don't own Teslas. Nevertheless, Teslas are viewed as in common use today. So this should be a slam dunk. We just hope the Supreme Court takes the case of Bianchi and or Bevis or Harrell or one of those cases out of Illinois, but only time will tell. But anyway, I think this is very good news that the Washington Post got this Pulitzer Prize. All right, folks, well, there you have it. Make sure you subscribe and resubscribe. We're trying to get to 150,000 subscribers. Don't forget to follow me on X, where I have even additional Second Amendment news every single day on X, at 4 Boxes Diner. And we will see you again soon here at the 4 Boxes Diner.
Orders up. Table 2A.